You can drink 8 glasses of water every day. You can follow a clean diet with precision and still remain in place, with pressure building, with no movement. The cause is often misunderstood. The issue is not water alone. What is missing, especially in a system beyond 60, is a critical component within daily intake that allows the intestine to maintain rhythm. With time, movement within the colon becomes slower. The muscular waves weaken. Transit becomes delayed. Many explanations are often given. Age, body type, external factors. Interventions follow. Supplements, digestive aids, repeated adjustments. Yet the internal pattern remains unchanged. There is a simpler path. No prescription is required. No supplementation is required. No complex preparation is required. The solution already exists, within common food sources, often overlooked. This is not a temporary workaround. It is a structural correction. It introduces what the system lacks, supports the retention of water within stool, and restores coordinated movement along the intestinal tract. Within this sequence, 3 specific foods will be presented. Each contributes to restoring flow, softening structure, and improving regularity. At the same time, 2 commonly used foods will be examined. Both appear beneficial, yet contribute to further slowing and dehydration within the system. The distinction is not in appearance, but in function. The final element will demonstrate the strongest effect. Remain through the sequence. The pattern becomes clear only when seen in full. Number 1. Canned chickpeas. For a system beyond 60, especially when constipation has become persistent, this is a simple intervention, often overlooked. But the oversight carries consequences. The large intestine does not require more medication. It requires the correct form of fiber to restore its natural rhythm. With age, intestinal movement slows. Muscular contractions weaken. Transit time increases. As movement slows, the colon continues to reabsorb water. The longer the stool remains, the drier and more compact it becomes. This is where chickpeas begin to act. 1 cup of canned chickpeas provides approximately 10 to 12 grams of fiber. The value is not only in quantity, but in composition. Insoluble fiber contributes structure. It increases stool bulk, creating the mechanical stimulus needed for forward movement. Soluble fiber absorbs water and forms a gel-like matrix. This matrix retains moisture, softens the stool, and reduces friction during passage. The effect is not force, but balance. Chickpeas also function as a prebiotic. They support the microbial environment within the intestinal system. As microbial activity stabilizes, movement becomes more regular, stool form becomes more consistent, and timing begins to align. Canned preparation adds another advantage. The structure is already softened. No prolonged cooking is required. The texture supports easier chewing and digestion. Use remains straightforward. Rinse and consume. Combine with olive oil and light seasoning. Blend into a paste with vegetables or fish, or incorporate into soups, porridge, or rice. If fiber intake has been low, introduction should be gradual to allow adaptation. Hydration remains essential. Fiber without sufficient water does not improve flow. It increases resistance. When applied correctly, change begins within days. Movement returns. The system responds again. Canned chickpeas are the first key. They introduce fiber into the gut, building bulk and softening stool. But there is something to understand clearly. Many people eat chickpeas and still do not experience immediate relief. Why? Because in the body beyond 60, the issue is not only a lack of fiber. The intestinal system becomes slower. Stool remains in the colon for longer periods. Water is gradually reabsorbed. What remains becomes dry, dense, compact. Fiber alone is not always enough. What the system needs is something that can both create movement and preserve moisture within the stool at the same time. This is where many older adults make a mistake. The element is either used incorrectly or not used at all, even though it sits right next to chickpeas on the same supermarket shelf. The second item is what noticeably increases softness and helps restore a steady intestinal rhythm. especially in cases where bowel movement only occurs once every 3 to 4 days. Continue forward, because this is the moment when a realization appears. Something simple, long overlooked, yet capable of shifting the entire process. Number 2. Canned lentils. If chickpeas are the ignition, lentils are what restore rhythm, especially for a common pattern after 60. Stool moves slowly, remains in the colon for too long, and water is gradually pulled back out, leaving it dry, dense, difficult to pass. Lentils address that root directly. They provide fiber, and at the same time help retain moisture within the stool. 1 cup of canned lentils contains roughly 12 to 15 grams of fiber. That is close to half of a full day's fiber intake, from a single, ready-to-eat source. The strength lies in the mechanism. First, soluble fiber forms a gel-like structure. It holds water within the stool, keeping it softer, more cohesive, allowing it to move smoothly instead of becoming compact. Second, fermentable fiber and resistant starch support beneficial gut bacteria. As the microbial environment stabilizes, intestinal movement becomes more consistent, bowel timing becomes more regular, and the sense of heaviness begins to fade. Because lentils are canned, they are already fully cooked and softened. Canned lentils help restore rhythm in the gut. They soften stool and support more regular movement. But this is where many people over 60 still get stuck. Fiber is already present, yet the stool remains dry. Why? Because the aging digestive system has a persistent pattern. It pulls water back from the stool more aggressively. This effect becomes stronger with high sodium intake, low physical movement, or the use of common medications. So in cases of constipation where the stool becomes dense, difficult to pass, and requires prolonged effort, adding fiber alone is sometimes not enough. The system needs something more. It needs a mechanism that can draw water into the intestine naturally, so that the stool becomes hydrated from within, and movement becomes smoother, without relying on harsh laxatives. This is where the third item enters. It is often overlooked, because it is mistaken for a simple snack, but that assumption is incorrect. It contains a specific component that supports gentle intestinal function, especially in later stages of life. The item is right here, but it requires careful selection, because choosing the wrong version removes the benefit entirely. Number 3. Canned pears. This is often the final step for a pattern of constipation common after 60, especially when the stool is dry, compact, and difficult to pass, with bowel movements occurring only every 3 to 4 days. Many assume constipation comes from not drinking enough water. That is not always the case. The issue is that water does not remain in the stool. The large intestine tends to pull water back out, and the longer stool stays inside, the drier and harder it becomes. Canned pears address this through 2 key components. First, pectin, a form of soluble fiber. Pectin forms a gel-like structure that helps retain water within the stool, making it softer, smoother, and easier to pass. Second, sorbitol, a naturally occurring sugar alcohol. Its mechanism is direct. Sorbitol draws water into the intestine, increasing hydration within the bowel contents. This effect can soften stool more quickly than many other fruits, especially when the system is already depleted of moisture. Canned pears also have a practical advantage. They are soft, easy to chew, easy to swallow, and well suited for older adults. In addition, the liquid within the can, when low in added sugar, can contribute to fluid intake, supporting hydration within the digestive tract. Use requires some attention. Choose varieties packed in juice or low sugar, not heavy syrup. Consume about half to 1 cup per serving, preferably in the morning or after a meal. They can be combined with oats, yogurt, or gently warmed for easier digestion. Sorbitol can have a strong effect in some cases. Excess intake may lead to bloating or loose stool. Moderation is important. When used correctly, the system becomes lighter, movement becomes easier and more regular, and relief can occur without reliance on medication. Warning number 1. Canned tuna. It sounds healthy, high in protein, convenient. But for a body over 60 dealing with constipation, Eating it every day without balance can make the condition worse. The issue is not that tuna is harmful. The issue is that it contains almost no fiber. Constipation requires two things: bulk to form the stool, and the ability to retain water within it. Tuna provides protein, but without fiber alongside it, the stool lacks structure. Movement through the colon becomes slower, and elimination becomes more difficult. In many cases, tuna is eaten with white bread, crackers, or white rice. These foods are low in fiber and can further reduce moisture retention. The result is predictable. Stool becomes drier, more compact, and harder to pass. There is also a common behavioral pattern. After eating tuna, many assume the meal is already healthy and reduce vegetables, fruits, and legumes. This removes the very elements the digestive system depends on. The outcome is increased stagnation, a heavier abdominal state, and more difficulty during bowel movement. The solution is not to eliminate tuna. The solution is to combine it correctly. Pair it with chickpeas, lentils, or leafy greens. Add a fiber-rich fruit after the meal. Maintain consistent water intake, and avoid excessive sodium. In summary, tuna is convenient, but when used in isolation, during constipation, it does not support recovery. Warning number 2. Canned milk, condensed milk, and evaporated milk. This is a hidden factor that many people over 60 use daily, while still believing their diet is balanced. If constipation is already present, and sweetened coffee or tea with condensed milk is consumed every day, or evaporated milk is used as a meal replacement, the condition can become more persistent. The reason is straightforward. Canned milk contains virtually no fiber. Without fiber, there is no structural bulk in the stool, and the intestine lacks the material needed to move contents forward. In addition, condensed milk is highly concentrated in sugar. It creates a temporary sense of fullness, which often reduces the intake of vegetables, legumes, and fruits. This leads to a dual effect. Fiber intake remains low, and the primary sources of fiber are gradually removed. For some systems, dairy can also contribute to bloating or abdominal pressure, which further reduces appetite for balanced meals. The result is a dietary pattern that becomes increasingly low in fiber, while intestinal movement becomes slower and less efficient. A repeating cycle can form. Constipation appears. Milk is used in an attempt to ease digestion, and the condition gradually intensifies. The approach is not complete elimination. It is correct use. Reduce frequency and portion size. Do not use it as a substitute for a full meal. Combine it with meals that include fiber sources such as legumes, vegetables, and fruit. Maintain consistent hydration. Understanding the role of each component prevents imbalance and supports a more stable digestive process. Let me walk through a real case. A pattern that becomes clear once everything is laid out. Dorothy, 61 years old. Daily habits followed common advice. Water in the morning, light meals at midday, smaller portions in the evening. Yet the outcome remained unchanged. Bowel movement occurred only once every 3 to 4 days. Abdominal pressure increased. Elimination required effort. Even afterward, the system did not feel complete. Laxatives became part of the routine. At times, they led to loose stool. At other times, the system slowed again. A repeating cycle formed. A closer look at daily intake revealed a consistent pattern. Canned tuna as a primary protein source, white rice or white bread as the main carbohydrate, and coffee or tea with condensed milk every day. The structure appeared simple and controlled, but the digestive system does not respond to simplicity alone. It requires fiber and the ability to retain water within stool. This pattern provided mostly protein and refined carbohydrates, with minimal fiber. As a result, stool remained in the colon longer and became progressively drier and more compact. 3 adjustments were introduced. First, half to 1 cup of chickpeas or lentils was added daily, alternating between the two. Second, half a serving of low-sugar canned pears was included after lunch. Third, canned tuna intake was reduced, and condensed milk was no longer used as a substitute for meals. Within the first week, abdominal heaviness began to decrease. By the second week, bowel movements became more regular, stool consistency improved, and less effort was required. Over the following 1 to 3 months, the reliance on laxatives diminished significantly. The system stabilized through consistent fiber intake and steady hydration. The conclusion is direct. Before turning to medication, the composition of daily intake must be corrected. Let this be the final summary. For a system beyond 60 experiencing constipation, age is not the defining cause. The process reflects what is repeatedly supplied to the body. The intestine does not stop without reason. It responds to structure, to composition, to what is present within each meal. 3 foods can help restore movement. First, canned chickpeas. They provide bulk, form the structure of stool, and create the mechanical force needed for forward motion. Second, canned lentils. They retain moisture within the stool, support internal hydration, and help maintain a steady rhythm. Third, low-sugar canned pears. They introduce soluble fiber and sorbitol, drawing water into the intestinal space, allowing smoother passage. At the same time, 2 commonly used foods can slow the system when used without balance. First, canned tuna. Without accompanying fiber, it contributes protein without structure, leading to drier, more compact stool. Second, condensed milk or evaporated milk. Low in fiber, often high in sugar, they reduce the intake of fiber-rich foods and shift the balance of the diet. The adjustment does not require complexity. Select one of the supportive foods. Introduce it consistently. Maintain hydration. Observe the change over several days. The system responds to repetition. Understanding alone does not alter the process. Application does. If further guidance is needed, continue with the next sequence.